Evelyn Cross sat by the tall, arched window of the estate's grand drawing room, her hand resting gently on her rounded belly. At 7 months pregnant, she carried herself with the quiet dignity and poise that had always defined her. Her silk robe flowed over her form like water, and the faint light of the winter morning illuminated her features, serene yet solemn. The mansion around her echoed silence, save for the occasional hush of a servant's steps or the crackle of the fireplace. But inside her, a storm brewed, hidden beneath her composed exterior. 4 months, Evelyn had sensed something was wrong. It wasn't just Landon's late-night meetings or his frequent trips to Tokyo that never resulted in jet lag. It was the way his eyes flickered away when she reached for him, the distance in his kisses, the rehearsed tone in his voice when he said, "I love you." Yet she hadn't confronted him. Not directly. Instead, she had poured herself into preparing for the baby's arrival, trying to shield her unborn child from the truth that her marriage was cracking at the seams. Miles away, in a private penthouse shielded from media and moral judgment, Juliana cradled her newborn daughter in her arms. Her long auburn curls were disheveled, and her eyes gleamed with fierce determination. She had gotten what she wanted, a child with Landon Cross. She had planned every step, from the affair to the timing of the pregnancy. Landon's child was hers first, and she believed that alone would tilt the scales in her favor. Yet even as she rocked the tiny infant, unease crept in. He hadn't returned her calls in 2 days. He hadn't come to the hospital when she delivered. And that silence felt like betrayal. Landon Cross stood at the edge of a private golf course, staring into the misty horizon. Guilt pressed on his chest like a weight he could no longer carry. He had made a mess, a terrible, irreversible mess. Juliana had given birth already, and Evelyn, his wife, was about to. 2 children, 2 women, and one lie after another. In the elite circles of the city, whispers had begun. The Cross Empire was rumored to be shaken not by financial ruin, but by something far worse. Infidelity, illegitimacy, and a war between 2 women who could both claim his future. It had started in Milan. Landon had flown there for a high-stakes investment conference, one of the many that peppered his calendar as CEO of Cross International. It was supposed to be a straightforward trip, a keynote address, closed-door meetings with board members, and drinks with foreign investors. But that's where Juliana entered, like a flame dancing too close to dry wood. She was the event coordinator for one of the European partners, sharp-witted and magnetic, with a smile that made men forget their vows. Her charm was not accidental. She had studied Landon long before they met, learned his interests, and knew how to exploit the cracks in his polished armor. Landon noticed her during the welcome dinner. The red silk dress she wore wasn't just beautiful, it was strategic. They talked briefly over dessert, and by the time coffee was served, she was seated beside him. Juliana listened when he spoke about the pressures of legacy, the expectations his name carried, the loneliness that sometimes trailed success. She told him she understood, said she admired men who built empires but never got the credit they deserved at home. Her words were sugar-laced poison. Landon, tired and far from home, didn't see the danger. What began as an innocent conversation turned into secret drinks the next evening, then a late-night confession about how unappreciated he felt, and finally, into a night in her suite that would mark the beginning of his downfall. Back in New York, Evelyn had sensed a shift. Landon had returned home quieter, more distracted. He was attentive, but it felt rehearsed, like he was playing the role of husband rather than truly being one. Still, she said nothing. She was already pregnant then, having found out just days before he left. She kept the news to herself for a while, hoping he'd return and everything would feel right again. It didn't. Then came the photo. It landed on a gossip blog, a grainy image of Landon stepping out of a hotel lobby with Juliana behind him. Her hand touched his arm in a way that wasn't professional. Evelyn stared at the screen for a long time, unmoving. Her heart didn't shatter dramatically. It cracked in silence, like porcelain under pressure. She didn't call him. She didn't scream. She closed the laptop, stood up, and went to her room. That night, she touched her belly and whispered, "You'll have everything, my love. No matter what." When Landon returned home, Evelyn greeted him at the door. Her face was unreadable, calm as ever. She said nothing about the photo. She cooked dinner. They ate in silence. She told him she was pregnant, and he faltered, just slightly, before congratulating her with a kiss that felt hollow. She didn't press for honesty. She didn't need it. She already knew. Juliana believed she had one. She imagined Evelyn would fall apart, that Landon would move out, that she would be publicly acknowledged soon. She daydreamed of press statements, of Instagram posts showing their daughter, of shopping trips funded by Cross Wealth. But weeks passed, and Evelyn remained. Silent, graceful, growing more radiant by the day. She took control of charity events, appeared in magazines, and continued her life as though nothing had happened. But beneath that composed exterior, Evelyn was planning. She didn't fight fire with fire. She sharpened her silence into strength. She didn't chase Landon, she let him watch what loyalty, class, and legacy looked like. She wasn't playing the mistress's game. She was preparing to win the war on her terms. Juliana lay in the dimly lit hospital suite, her skin slick with sweat, hair clinging to her temples. The room smelled of antiseptic and roses, a bizarre combination brought on by the luxury bouquet she'd ordered herself, convinced that this moment would mark her triumph. In her arms lay her newborn daughter, pink and squirming, a tuft of dark hair already peeking from her tiny head. Juliana looked down at her with a fierce kind of love, possessive and almost desperate. She had named her Isla, a name she believed sounded elegant, timeless, worthy of the Cross legacy. She had imagined this moment so many times. Landon would burst into the room, breathless and emotional, maybe even shedding a tear. He would cradle Isla, whisper something about fate, then kiss Juliana and finally say the words she'd been waiting for, "I'm leaving Evelyn." But none of that happened. He arrived 6 hours after Isla's birth, unannounced and silent. His tailored coat looked untouched by the cold outside, and his face was unreadable, stern, almost blank. Juliana lit up the moment he entered, her voice rising with excitement. "She's here, Landon. She's perfect. Come, hold her." Landon stepped forward, hands tucked in his coat pockets, gaze fixed on the baby. He didn't reach out. He didn't sit down. He simply stared. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered finally, his voice flat. Juliana blinked, smile faltering. "What do you mean? This is your daughter." Landon nodded once. "I know. I'm not denying that. But it was never meant to get this far. You knew the terms, Juliana." "The terms?" she snapped, eyes narrowing. "Are you seriously talking to me like this was some kind of contract? That baby is your blood." He didn't argue. He didn't even raise his voice. "I'll make sure she's cared for. Financially. But I can't be the man you think I'll become." Juliana's heart thudded with rage. Her hand gripped the blanket around Isla tighter as she hissed, "I will not be some secret. I will not raise your daughter like a shameful mistake while your wife plays the happy mother in your mansion." "I never asked you to do this," he replied coldly. Her lip trembled as she realized what he was doing, what he wasn't doing. "You think you can walk away? That I'll stay quiet while you play happy family with her?" Landon looked down at Isla once more. For a flicker of a second, emotion cracked through, maybe guilt, maybe confusion. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "Don't make threats, Juliana. You'll only make things worse, for you and the child." And with that, he left. No kiss. No touch. No promise. Juliana sat frozen, staring at the door. Fury bloomed in her chest like wildfire. He thought she wouldn't dare. He thought she wouldn't go public. But if he wouldn't claim Isla, she'd make sure the world knew. Whether Landon liked it or not. Evelyn moved through the halls of the Cross estate like a ghost wrapped in silk. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor, her hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. Though inside she felt as if she were splintering apart, her face never betrayed it. To the outside world, she was still the poised wife of billionaire Landon Cross, beautiful, intelligent, unshaken. Her eyes, however, had dimmed just slightly, and only those who knew her deeply could see the storm she was quietly weathering. The media buzzed with rumors. A mysterious woman. A rumored child. Whispers that Landon's loyalty had strayed. But Evelyn gave no response, no public comment, no reaction. She attended charity events, smiled politely, and nodded gracefully when asked about her pregnancy. "We're very excited," she'd say, with that same elegant calm that made people wonder whether the tabloids had been wrong. But inside, every article, every look of pity from acquaintances, every moment of silence from Landon chipped away at her resolve. Still, she refused to collapse. The nursery became her sanctuary. She threw herself into its design, not out of distraction, but from purpose. She chose soft sage green walls, ivory curtains, and shelves lined with plush toys and children's books. She handpicked every detail: the crib, the rocking chair, the nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. Each object felt like a message, a promise to the life growing inside her. Her child would feel loved, wanted, safe, even if the marriage around them crumbled. Landon barely noticed. He came and went like a guest in his own home, distracted and emotionally distant. Evelyn didn't confront him. Not yet. She spoke to him gently when he was around, told him about doctor's appointments, mentioned baby names in passing, even sat beside him in silence during dinners where their forks clinked louder than their words. She didn't beg. She didn't accuse. Instead, she simply continued to exist with grace, hoping, perhaps foolishly, that he would remember who she was and who they had once been. At night, after her bath and chamomile tea, Evelyn would sit by the nursery window and write letters to her unborn child in a cream-colored journal bound in leather. "My dearest little one," she'd begin, "if you ever feel unloved in this world, remember that I loved you long before I ever held you." In every letter, she poured out her fears, her hopes, her strength. "I will not let this pain touch you. I will not let my silence become your burden. I will fight for your peace, even if it costs me mine." One afternoon, her oldest friend, Harper, came by. Harper looked at her with eyes full of concern, the kind that only real friends carry. "He's punishing you with distance, Ev. Don't let this man break you." Evelyn smiled faintly, placing a hand over her belly. "He won't," she whispered. "Because I've already decided, I'm not breaking. I'm building something better." It started with a whisper on the morning feeds, a blurred photo posted by an anonymous account that quickly snowballed into a media frenzy. A striking woman, red-haired and radiant, held a baby wrapped in a pale pink blanket. The caption read simply, "Every child deserves to be claimed, even by billionaires." Within hours, the internet connected the dots. The woman in the photo was Juliana Voss, former public relations director for a major European investment firm. And the child, allegedly the daughter of none other than Landon Cross. The tabloids went wild. Billionaire's secret love child? Affair confirmed? Cross empire shaken by scandal. 2 women. 1 man. 1 fortune. News outlets resurrected old photos, comparing Isla's eyes to Landon's. Blogs speculated about the timeline, implying that Evelyn had been pregnant at the same time as Juliana. Social media became a battleground of theories, memes, and outrage. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone wanted Evelyn to speak. But she didn't. She continued her quiet routine, attended her final prenatal appointments, and answered no questions. Even as reporters swarmed the gates of the estate and headlines screamed betrayal, she remained composed. Her publicist released a single line: "Mrs. Cross is focused on her health and the safe delivery of her child. She has no comment at this time." Landon, on the other hand, avoided the press entirely. He stopped attending events, cancelled meetings, and retreated into his office. The pressure mounted, but he gave no statement. And that silence only made the noise louder. Then came the gala. It was a high-profile charity event, hosted in a glass-domed ballroom overlooking the Hudson, meant to raise funds for a children's hospital. Evelyn, dressed in a flowing navy gown that accentuated her baby bump, made her first public appearance since the scandal. She looked breathtaking, every inch the dignified wife. Cameras flashed. Reporters gasped. She smiled, said nothing, and walked inside. Everything was fine. Until it wasn't. Halfway through the evening, as guests mingled near the champagne fountains and waiters carried gold-rimmed hors d'oeuvres, the doors to the ballroom burst open. Gasps filled the room as Juliana strode in, a diamond-studded clutch on one arm and baby Isla on the other. She wore crimson, a color that demanded attention, and her presence sucked the air out of the space. Conversations halted. Glasses trembled in hands. Cameras snapped furiously. Juliana didn't wait for permission. She walked straight up to Landon, who stood near the donor wall, caught entirely off guard. Her voice, amplified by the hush, cut through the room. "Tell them who your real family is, Landon." He stared at her, frozen. Eyes flicked from Isla's small face to Juliana's trembling jaw. He didn't speak. "Tell them," she said again, louder. "Tell them this child isn't a mistake. Tell them she's yours." Landon opened his mouth. But nothing came out. Evelyn watched from across the room, standing beside a group of stunned philanthropists. Her fingers curled around her clutch, her heart aching with a pain she could not show. She met her husband's eyes for a brief, searing second, then turned away before he could see the tear escape down her cheek. The flash of cameras continued. The silence screamed. And the war had officially gone public. Landon Cross had always been a man of control. He negotiated billion-dollar mergers with calm precision, brokered global partnerships without blinking, and led a financial empire that few dared to question. But now, sitting alone in the dim light of his private study, his hands trembling against a crystal tumbler of untouched whiskey, he felt like a man completely unmoored. The fallout from the gala had spiraled fast. In just 3 days, Cross International's stock dipped, investors called emergency meetings, and legal teams were scrambling to assess the damage. But the chaos in the boardroom was nothing compared to the one brewing in his personal life. Juliana had wasted no time. She released a formal statement to the media, confirming Landon as Isla's father and accusing him of emotional abandonment. She hired a ruthless attorney who threatened to sue for child support and future inheritance rights, claiming Isla was entitled to a portion of the Cross legacy, just like any legitimate child. The board began asking uncomfortable questions. His mother sent word through a trusted aide, "Handle this before the name is tarnished further." Landon had never felt such suffocating pressure. Then there was Evelyn. She didn't scream. She didn't storm out. She simply stood before him in their sunlit kitchen, holding a mug of tea with steady hands and eyes that held the kind of quiet strength that made him feel small. She had always carried herself with grace, even when the world tried to strip it from her. But now, something had changed. There was steel in her spine. "I'm not going to beg you, Landon," she said softly, but firmly. "I never have. But I need you to understand something." He looked up at her, weary. "Our child," she continued, placing a hand on her belly, "is going to watch us. Every day. He'll watch how you treat his mother. What kind of man you are. And he'll learn from that. So I need you to decide, right now, what kind of man you want our child to see." The words struck him deeper than any headline or legal threat ever could. She turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. "This isn't about her. Or me. This is about who you are. And whether that person is worth staying for." She left him there, the silence roaring louder than any confrontation. That night, Landon sat awake, surrounded by documents, photos, and the echo of his own guilt. He thought of Juliana, how she had entered his life like a wildfire, tempting and wild, feeding off his dissatisfaction. She had promised excitement, escape. But she had never loved him. She had loved what he represented. Power. Wealth. Status. Evelyn had loved him when he was just a man. He remembered how she nursed his father in his final months, how she organized charity drives during hurricane season, how she never cared for headlines, just family. She had stood by him, even when the silence between them grew unbearable. She had swallowed humiliation in public and pain in private, all for the child they hadn't even met yet. He made his decision before dawn. The following afternoon, he stood before a sea of press outside the Cross Foundation headquarters. The cameras clicked. Microphones extended. Juliana had released another photo of Isla earlier that morning, claiming Landon had refused to acknowledge his daughter. It was time to end the chaos. Landon stepped up to the podium, flanked by his legal team. "I want to make a brief statement regarding recent allegations," he began. "I take full responsibility for the mistakes I've made in my personal life. A child has come into the world as a result of those mistakes, and I will ensure she is provided for. But let me be clear, what happened was a betrayal, not just to my wife, but to the values I claim to stand for." He paused, scanning the sea of reporters. "I love my wife, Evelyn. I always have. And I refuse to let our child grow up watching me dishonor the woman who taught me what love really means." Back at the estate, Evelyn watched the live feed. Her eyes filled, but she didn't smile. Not yet. Across town, Juliana threw her phone across the room. Her plan had failed. And for the first time in months, Landon felt something like clarity. The poison was being cut out. Slowly, painfully, but completely. Juliana's carefully crafted illusion began to unravel the moment Landon made his public declaration. In under 24 hours, the media tide shifted. The same outlets that had once painted her as a wronged woman now labeled her a gold digger, a calculated seductress who had tried to manipulate her way into a billion-dollar empire. Headlines no longer framed her as a victim. They branded her a scandal. Her social media accounts were flooded with hate. Brands that once paid her for endorsements and appearances terminated contracts without hesitation. Luxury labels unfollowed her, invitations stopped arriving, and her inbox turned cold. The fame she had courted, the spotlight she had chased, turned against her like a fire she could no longer control. The apartment Landon had secretly paid for? Disconnected. His legal team ensured she received a financial package for Isla's future, but nothing more. The bank transfers were clinical, devoid of emotion, the message loud and clear: "You are no longer welcome in this world." Juliana spiraled. She stopped taking care of herself. She screamed at reporters outside her building, accusing them of turning on her. She posted cryptic stories on her accounts, implying betrayal and injustice, but no one came to her defense. Even her own family stopped picking up the phone. The only thing she clung to was Isla, tiny, beautiful, innocent. But even that love was twisted by her bitterness and pain. The final blow came when she found out Evelyn was hosting a baby shower at the Cross Estate, a grand celebration attended by New York's elite, philanthropists, socialites, and celebrities. The event was a press-covered affair, a symbol of strength and elegance. Evelyn, heavily pregnant, glowing in a soft blush gown, became the face of grace under fire. Juliana couldn't take it. She arrived uninvited, pushing through the crowd of security, Isla bundled in her arms. Her voice broke through the classical music and polite chatter. "You think your baby deserves more than mine," she screamed, her eyes wild with rage. "You all cheer for her while my daughter gets erased? Is that the kind of woman you really are, Evelyn?" Gasps echoed around the garden. Guests froze. Cameras were lowered in stunned silence. Evelyn turned to her slowly. Her expression remained composed. She took a breath, then stepped forward, her hands resting gently on her stomach. "Every child deserves love," Evelyn said softly, her voice carrying through the hush. "But not every parent deserves a child." The words struck like a slap, clean and sharp. Security moved in, gently taking Juliana by the arms. She didn't resist at first. Then, as she realized what was happening, she began to cry, loud, uncontrollable sobs. Her screams echoed through the garden as she clutched Isla tighter. "You'll regret this," she shrieked. "You'll regret this when you see her eyes, Landon. She's yours too." But Landon wasn't there to hear it. As Juliana was escorted out, Evelyn closed her eyes and exhaled. The war was ending. But the wounds would take much longer to heal. The hospital suite was calm and bathed in soft morning light, a world away from the chaos that had consumed their lives in recent months. White roses adorned the side table, and the distant hum of machines served as a steady background to the rhythm of anticipation. Evelyn lay on the hospital bed, her breath heavy, her body exhausted but determined. Landon sat beside her, holding her hand tightly, his eyes never leaving hers. Hours had passed in quiet urgency. Nurses moved in and out, speaking in hushed tones. The pain was intense, but Evelyn never screamed. She gritted her teeth, focused on her breathing, and held on, both to the child she was about to meet and to the fragments of strength that had carried her through betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak. Landon hadn't left her side since they arrived. For the first time in months, he wasn't hiding behind silence or guilt. He was simply present, raw, unguarded, and terrified. He whispered encouragement between contractions, kissed her forehead when she trembled, and silently prayed as the hours crept by. Finally, at dawn, a new sound filled the room, a baby's first cry. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears as the doctor lifted the tiny boy into the world. He was red and wrinkled and perfect. The nurse placed him gently on her chest, and Evelyn let out a soft, choked laugh of relief and joy. Landon's hand gripped hers tightly as he leaned in to see their son, their son. They named him Liam. Landon stood still, overcome by the sight. Evelyn handed Liam to him, and as Landon took the small, squirming bundle into his arms, something inside him broke open. His throat tightened, and his vision blurred. "I never knew what love was," he whispered, voice trembling. "Until now." He sat down beside Evelyn, cradling Liam close. The baby's eyes fluttered open for just a moment, tiny, curious, and full of life. Landon kissed his forehead. His heart ached with both joy and regret, knowing how much damage he'd caused, how close he'd come to losing this moment forever. Later that evening, as Evelyn rested with Liam asleep in her arms, Landon met with his legal team in the hospital's private conference room. He signed document after document, transferring ownership of trust funds, property assets, and stock shares into Evelyn's and Liam's names. It was more than a gesture, it was a decision. Juliana would receive nothing more. No further payouts. No claim to the cross-name or legacy. Isla would be cared for through a separate fund, strictly limited and managed independently. But Juliana herself was cut off, financially and publicly. Evelyn didn't ask for this. She hadn't demanded a price for staying. But Landon had finally understood what his family meant, and this was how he chose to show it. That night, in the quiet of the hospital room, Liam slept between them. Evelyn, eyes still heavy, smiled faintly as Landon brushed a finger along their son's cheek. The pain hadn't vanished. But something new had taken root. Hope. Weeks passed, and the walls of the Cross estate slowly began to feel like a home again, not a battlefield. Evelyn, though still guarded, allowed Landon to return, not fully into her heart, but into the shared space where healing could begin. Her love had once been unquestioning. Now, it came with conditions, shaped by pain, maturity, and the need for self-respect. She agreed to give him one chance. Just one. They began attending therapy together, something Landon had initially resisted but soon embraced. In the quiet of the counselor's office, away from reporters and business calls, they unpacked everything: his betrayal, her silence, the weight of public judgment, and the child they were now raising together. Evelyn was clear from the beginning. "No more lies," she said firmly during one session, her voice unwavering. "No more disappearing into guilt. If you want to be here, you show up. As a husband. As a father. As a man who doesn't disrespect what we've built." Landon nodded, not with excuses, but with remorse. For once, he listened without defending himself. As part of their healing, Landon knew there was one last thread he had to cut cleanly. He arranged to meet Juliana in a private office downtown. When she arrived, her once polished presence was dulled by weeks of public disgrace and personal disappointment. She walked in with her chin lifted, but there was defeat in her eyes. "I'm not here to argue," Landon began. "Isla will be taken care of. She's my daughter, and I won't let her suffer for our mistakes." A trust has been established for her future. Education, health, everything she might need. Juliana narrowed her eyes. And me. There's nothing left for us, he said simply. This ends now. No more contact. No more appearances. No more games. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She stood for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of doubt, then realized there was none left. Fine, she muttered, standing slowly. But one day, she'll look like me. And you'll remember everything you turned your back on. Without another word, she walked out of his life for good. From that day forward, Juliana vanished from the public eye. No interviews. No scandals. Just silence. And back at home, Evelyn took one cautious step closer to forgiving the man who had nearly destroyed her. Because healing, she knew, didn't come from forgetting, but from knowing it would never happen again. A warm spring breeze fluttered through the white tents set up in the gardens of the Cross Estate. The annual charity gala had returned, but this year, it bore a different name and a deeper meaning, the Grace Foundation for Mothers. Evelyn stood at the center of the stage beneath a floral arch, microphone in hand, her soft lavender dress flowing with each gust of wind. The crowd, composed of donors, activists, and women from all walks of life, listened intently as she spoke, not just as a host, but as a survivor. This past year has taught me more than any degree, any business deal, or any magazine spread ever could, she said, voice steady, eyes shimmering. It taught me that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. That resilience grows not in comfort, but in fire. And that motherhood, real motherhood, is an act of both love and strength. Scattered applause broke out across the audience, and many wiped their eyes, touched by the raw honesty behind her elegance. At her feet, little Liam, now 1 year old, crawled across the stage with wobbling determination, completely unaware of the significance of the moment he was interrupting. Evelyn smiled down at him, pausing her speech to gently lift him into her arms. This little one reminded me, she continued, kissing the crown of his head, that even after the worst storms, the sun can rise again. In the crowd, Landon stood at the edge of the tent, watching her with quiet awe. Gone was the man who thought power came from prestige. A year of hard-earned growth and difficult redemption had taught him otherwise. He had chosen Evelyn, but more importantly, he had chosen to become a man worthy of the life they were building. His hand rested over his chest as he listened, heart full, eyes never leaving her. As Evelyn stepped down from the stage, greeting guests and sharing hugs with the single mothers she now championed, a quiet moment passed behind her. A nanny walked by, gently pushing a stroller. Inside it, Isla sat upright, her chubby fingers wrapped around a soft toy, her curious eyes scanning the crowd. Evelyn noticed. For a moment, the world went still. She looked at Isla, so small, so innocent, and then at the young woman caring for her. No words were spoken. Evelyn didn't flinch, didn't falter. She simply gave a soft nod. A gesture not of warmth, but of peace. Recognition. Closure. And then she turned back toward the sunlit path lined with guests and supporters, where Liam reached out from her arms, giggling at the petals that danced through the air. The past hadn't vanished. It lingered, quiet and far away. But Evelyn didn't carry its weight anymore. Her future was here. And it belonged to her now.